Peterson, who's going to facilitate our program this evening. I would just ask that you pay attention to our video as it's being played. The sound, you really have to be quiet to really understand it, so really give it your full attention. And Greg, thank you and Tim for presenting this program this evening, and I'll give it to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I love it. I'm talking to an empty floor. What a crowd. What a crowd.
You'll be in an empty room
soon. Pretty soon. Wow. 60 years ago. 60 years ago. June 26th, 1959. The boxing world was shocked to view the crowning of a new heavyweight champion of the world. Swedish-born Ingmar Johansson became the toast of all Swedes, far and wide. Does anybody remember that time period? There we go. And Russ Ecklund, Tim Magnuson, Russ Ecklund actually was there.
No.
Yes, Russ Ecklund was there. And so we have in our midst an actual eyewitness of some of the things you're going to see tonight. In fact, well, a little known fact, maybe you'll talk about it, maybe you won't. If you're going to talk about it, you would probably forgotten about it. And is the fact that the actual date got postponed a few times because it was raining. It was 2 days, right? So Russ hung in there, being a good Swede and betting against Bet. And in fact, John Anderson I learned tonight, ever the conservative Swede, if there was ever one. Well, that's the point. Is somebody, Peterson was the champion, Johansson coming over from Sweden fighting, and some guy ran around and was giving 5-to-1 odds. Now, can you imagine John Anderson pulling out $5 to put that on? Visualize 1959, John Anderson doing that. But in fact, it worked. John Anderson is now $25 richer because of Ingmar Johansson.
You still got it.
Fast forward. In 2001, a group which included myself founded the Robert H. Jackson Center, because you knew the Jackson Center would somehow get into this conversation. Nancy Barger had sent to me an article from the American Scandinavian magazine, authored by a gentleman by the name of Lars Ottosson. Lars Ottosson, very Swedish. And Lars was an author. And in the end of the magazine, there's always the notes regarding the author's biography. And in it, it described him as having reported, this is Lars Ottosson, having reported the last days of the Nuremberg trial for BBC European Services, and was the voice of the broadcast from New York City of the Johansson-Peterson fight, and in fact, he was in the ring with Howard Cosell getting the interview. So here's a guy that Nancy Barger turned me on to, who was at the trial when Jackson concluded it. He's at the Johansson-Peterson fight. You cannot make that up. So on an event, we created an event, and the American Scandinavian Heritage Society, of which many of you are members, embraced the concept that on February 12th, 2002, Lars Ottosson came here, and that also happened to be Robert Jackson's birthday. And with the help of John Selstrom and Jerry Hagelin, among others, Lars Ottosson was here. And during the course of that conversation, we interviewed him about Nuremberg, as you would expect, but most importantly, and most interestingly for tonight's purposes, about his relationship with Ingmar Johansson. So part of what you're going to hear tonight is Lars Ottesen, friend of, reporter about Ingmar Johansson, being interviewed by me on a little bit about the guy, a little bit about the fight that he reported. How did we get here tonight? One, there's a poster to my left, large poster, and you'll see two individuals, Floyd Patterson and Ingmar Johansson. There was an auction in Ohio about 3 or 4 months ago. It was online. Somehow I'm on it, watching it, and scrolling along, and guess what? I saw it. I go, you gotta be kidding me. If you're Swedish and you lived through 1959, you must have that poster. So, dug deep. Did not tell my wife that I did that until tonight.
Happy birthday, sweetheart.
Yeah. Yeah, my birthday now.
Merry Christmas.
So I get it, and I then share it with Randy Anderson, fellow Swede extraordinaire, and we talk about there ought to be an excuse to show the poster. Because just a few months prior to that, at a hawk shop down under the viaduct in Jamestown, I was walking in there, and there at the top of a pile of a bunch of stuff is a 8x10 photo, which is over there, and I want everybody, and also in the program, yes, in the program, an 8x10 photo, and you'll note that it's a bunch of people who've taken on a plane, and they're on their way to the Johansson-Patterson fight. To date, this is your job tonight, please look in the back of that. See if you can identify anybody, because we have struck out. We cannot find a soul, but I gotta believe, given the nature of the fight, it's a bunch of Swedes on their way to see their man fight, and let us know, because we'd like to identify somebody. So anyways, Randy Anderson I gave him that picture. Randy Anderson sees that poster. Randy Anderson says, that's a program, that's a program, that's a program. I have no idea what he's talking about. Next thing you know, he introduces the fact that Tim Magnuson, who is a boxing fan, again, extraordinaire, but the problem was we had to get Tim out of his shell. He's a pretty reticent guy, as we all know, and so to entice him to try to come forward, this kid, be part of a program honoring Ingmar Johansson, given his boxing background, was a difficult thing to do, but nevertheless, we prevailed, and you'll get a chance to see that tonight. And we have put together sort of an 8-minute piece of an interview with Lars Ottesen. Now you got to tune in. I know we're all Swedish. He has an accent. You shouldn't be able to understand it, but nevertheless, it does. So you'll hear a fascinating story. He's funny. He's funny. So let's, Chip, if we could, show a little bit of Ingemar Johansson. The first and only Scandinavian heavyweight champion of the world was Ingmar Johansson. Listen to Lars Ottesen's reflection on him.
Ingmar Johansson, born in Göteborg, and a little bit of a troublemaker there as a young boy. And he did his military service in the Navy, and that's where he was introduced to boxing. He was in a couple of brawls, and then his commanding officer thought, now we better teach this boy a little bit of boxing, and he could sort of take him off the street fights. And he became our top amateur boxer, Swedish champion, and he went to the Olympics in Helsinki, where he got disqualified for non-boxing. Coming back from Helsinki, he decided to go professional, because there was a man in Gothenburg called Edvin Ahlqvist, who was a promoter for fighters, a very honest, straightforward and good man, and he saw a lot in Ingemar, and he was the one that presented the name Thor's hammer of Ingmar Johansson's right hand. And they made him train right, eat right, do right. And Ingemar rose to the top and became European champion. And everybody in Europe believed that this was one of the greatest fighters that time in the world. And this was, I think, 1957, 58. It was an American boxer called Eddie Machen, who was the #1 challenger. He was going to meet Floyd Peterson about the World Championships. He was just going on a little business to Europe first, training town. He was going to meet some European clot called Ingmar Johansson in Gothenburg, and then he was going to go back. And so he did. He came to Gothenburg and he climbed the ring, and it took 1 minute and 10 minutes, and Eddie Machen was on the floor. And that was, of course, not what people had reckoned with, especially not those who bought big ringside tickets and didn't even get a seat. So automatically then Ingemar came up as a challenger. Set for a fight in June 1959 and stayed up in the Catskills. He put his training camp and he became very popular. The Ingemar was going to take place. Sweden wanted to listen to it, and the Swedish state radio didn't want to send it because it was immoral. Professional fighting is immoral. Mm-hmm. So then Philips company in Sweden, which is the big equivalent to Norelco here, decided to send this fight over the Radio Luxembourg. And they needed someone to do the direct broadcast. I reckon very rapidly I was basically the only one who's ever done direct broadcast in my sports in Sweden, outside of the Swedish state radio. So I called up the head of the Swedish Philips, who happened to know, and said, I see you got me a job. He said, what job? Well, the fight. I said, why should I do that? I said, because there isn't anyone else around. I've done it. That's roughly recovered. And we then formed a program. We had to have a broadcast from New York for a full week to teach the Swedes how to tune in to Radio Luxembourg, so they were really on the station at this very night. America has a habit of creating jobs. Sweden has a habit of cutting them. Or something like that. Anyway, the broadcast went very well, and I remember I climbed the ring, and no one was allowed up in the ring. Howard Cosell, he just jumped up. Everybody knew Howard Cosell, right? So he went up with the mic. And, of course, no one knew me. And I came with my microphone up. So I remember Johansson, Ottosson. So I took up my passport and I put my thumb over Otto in Ottosson. And I just showed it and I said, I'm Ingmar's brother. I'm going to go, oh, they said, Mr. Johansson. I went up with the microphone. Because otherwise I couldn't explain to them the Swedish broadcasting, etc. Sure. They want the identification of that. So I thought that was the...
Ingmar Johansson scores a third-round knockout victory over Floyd Patterson to win the World Heavyweight title. Ingemar becomes the first foreign-born heavyweight champion since Primo Canera won the title a quarter of a century ago. A very happy Ingemar is congratulated by his handlers.
He is still probably the most popular figure Sweden has ever had.
Into the 1990s, they'd sign autographs, and if they couldn't do that, they always made it together, regardless of where each was living, at least one time a year. But by the mid-1990s, neither Johansson nor Patterson could visit because the damage much of it visited by one upon the other in those 3 fights. The damage was such that it led to Alzheimer's type dementia for both Johansson and Peterson. Ingemar spent about the last decade or so of his life in a Swedish nursing home. In 2009, at the age of 76, he died. Peterson, suffering from that same malady, had died 3 years earlier at the age of 71.
Unique confrontations took place a few months later, but no one realized it. Ingmar Johansson, in black trunks, training to fight Floyd Patterson, went 3 rounds with speedy young Cassius. The upstart youngster, not knowing his proper place, boxed his way around the ring as if it were he using Ingo for a sparring partner.
For Johansson, $100,000 cash to meet me in a national televised fight. And
he turned it down.
Yes, he said that the fight wouldn't draw free ticket holders and that I didn't have the ability to step in the same ring with him. So I said, well, if I didn't have the ability to fight him and he knew he was going to win and the fight wouldn't draw free ticket holders, well, why don't he come on over here, knock me out, and pick up that $100,000? Well, that's the part I don't understand.
One of the things I'm looking forward to next is, in fact, Tim Magnuson. Now, Tim Magnuson, rockin' tour above beyond belief, as we know. And he gives toast. He's the best toast giver there is. So I would like to give a toast, hearkening into a booklet. Wait, some of you Norden Club members may remember voting on and actually spending to make a publication. It's for Robert Jackson Center, and it's the 5 addresses by Robert H. Jackson to Swedish-American organizations, were in fact published by the Norden Club. Can you imagine spending the money to do this again? Unbelievable. And John Anderson led the charge. And this is a booklet. I have a few left, so when you're picking up the DVD of the King, similarly, pick up one of these things tonight. Bonus, bonus. So anyways, within this, and I thought of Tim. In 1932, Robert Jackson spoke on prohibition before the Norden Club of Jamestown, New York. And he concludes in this manner. He said, "My problem," Jackson, "like yours, the Swedes, is that I, and certainly my children, want to be sober, industrious, and self-disciplined youths. The whole prohibition movement has given me no help and no assurance in that matter. As a non-Romanist, I am bound in simple justice to say that there is, in my observance, the Roman Catholic Church is far in advance in guiding its people to a sane, sober, and well-ordered moral life, and must infinitely more helpful to a parent than all the farcical forces of prohibition enforcement. Goodbye, prohibition. Say hello to Tim Magnuson."
How do you follow that up? Well, I don't know how I got roped into this, but Greg Peterson and Randy Anderson came up with this idea, and I found out about it weeks after they came up with the idea, and they told me what I was going to do. They never came and asked me if I would like to do it. They just said, "This is what your part is." So I'm here, and I'm going to give it to you. I got two parts to this tonight. The first is how I got into boxing, which has to do with this fight, this particular fight. And the second part is a little bit of history on Ingo. And some of it has been already told by Lars here, but I'll repeat it because maybe you didn't hear it with his accent there. The papers after the fight in New York City, the headline was Ingo Bingo. So we talked about the Norden Club's Ingo Bingo tonight. This is our little Ingo Bingo for Ingmar Johansson, our Swedish heavyweight champion. I wanted to be involved in this event because I have loved boxing since I was a little kid, and specifically because of this fight. When I was a kid, my brother and I lived on 63 Grant Street at the top of Windsor Hill with our parents, obviously. We had a two-family house. We lived in the downstairs. And my brother and I shared a bedroom, which was the dining room. There was only one bedroom, which was my folks, and Pete and I lived in the dining room. We had two twin beds set up there. And this fight took place on January 26th, 1959. Or excuse me, June 26th, 1959. My birthday is June 27th, the day after this fight. So we came home, and my dad had set up this old little radio / record player that we had between our two beds. And he said to us, "We're going to stay up tonight." And my brother and I are thinking, "Oh yeah, we get to stay up. You know, we're not going to go to bed tonight, we get to stay up." And he says, "Tonight, we're going to listen to the heavyweight championship of the world between Swedish Ingmar Johansson and Floyd Patterson, the heavyweight champion." Well, we didn't know a heck of a lot about that. But then he says, "And we're going to have snacks." Okay, we're going to have some snacks, it's going to be great. So we go out, we get our little TV trays out, and we set them next to our beds. And by the time the fight started, we're eating our snacks. Most kids' snacks would be popcorn, you know, peanuts, chips and dip, whatever. Not us. These two little Swedish kids. I'm 6, my brother's 7. Our snack was Guffle Beater, the little herrings in the tins with mixed crackers. And we loved it. We had herring with tomato sauce, we had herring with dill sauce, herring with mustard sauce, and we just loved it. So we're pounding away at our little tidbits of herring, and the fight gets going, and it's this old record player radio, and it's going in and out. You can hear parts of it, you can't hear parts of it, and you got to know two things. And Artisan mentioned one of them. Ingo's nickname was the Hammer of Thor, because he was such a punishing fighter. But his right hand was nicknamed Tunder. It had its own nickname. His right hand was Thunder. Tunder. So, if you knew my dad, Charlie, he only had one hand. He only had one arm. It was his right arm. And it was strong, because he only had one, and he had to do everything with it. Well, this fight gets going, and we're listening, and we're eating. And all of a sudden, we hear, "Patterson is down." And my dad jumps up, and he's walking around, and we can't hear too much more, and all of a sudden we hear, "Patterson's down again." And we're thinking, holy cow, my dad's going crazy. You know, and he's excited, and we've never seen him like this, because he's just moving and shaking. Finally, and what you saw here was 2 knockdowns in that fight, the last 2 knockdowns. Ingo knocked Patterson down 7 times in that round. He pounded him. And the last thing we hear is, "Ingmar Johansson is the new heavyweight champion of the world." And my dad jumps up, and he's swinging his right arm, and he's running around going, "Tunder, Tunder, Tunder." And my brother and I jump up, and we go, "Tunder, Tunder, Tunder." And that was the start of my life in boxing, and we never turned back. My brother and I never looked back. We've been boxing fans for the rest of our lives. We've gone all over the country to championship fights. My good friend Greg Peterson and I have gone to a number of dinners and all kinds of things for boxing, and Greg always brings his camera. Actually, he was at the Tony Tubbs heavyweight championship fight. He was in the ring with his camera taking pictures. But he's been kind enough to take my picture with many, many past boxing champions, and I have him on my little wall of fame at home. But Greg is a tremendous fan, and I have to say, I'm not like these two guys here. Randy and Greg. I'm not like them. They are sports fanatics. All sports. They love sports. They're involved in every sport. I'm somewhat of a boxing fanatic, but these guys are a breed of their own. They're special sports fans, and I give them a lot of credit, especially Randy for putting the Hall of Fame together like he has. It's phenomenal. But that's how I got into boxing. That was our the first time we ever even knew what boxing was, and it was because of Ingmar Johansson. And Ingo, you heard Lars say that he was a troubled youth, and he was a lot more than that. He was a womanizer. He was a real ladies' man. And the one thing about Ingo, wherever he went, the women loved him. And they were all over him. And he, by the time he was 17, he had fathered 2 illegitimate children. They were put up for adoption. He never saw them. At 18, he got married. And he was married for a few months. And he decided he was going to step out. So that didn't last. And then the following year, he fathered another illegitimate child, his son, Eddie. And he never met Eddie until Ingo was 48 years old. And he did end up finding a real attractive athletic girl in Göteborg named Bridget Lundgren. And she didn't want to have anything to do with him at first. But he persisted, and in the end, he won her over, and she started traveling with him to his fights. Wherever he went, she was there. And it was a big scandal at the time because they weren't married. And back in those days, in the late 50s, early 60s, you weren't supposed to do that, but he didn't care. And he eventually married her. But it took a long time because he never bothered to divorce his first wife. So, yeah, sooner or later, they got together. He was wined and dined in New York City like nobody after he won the heavyweight championship. He was the king of the world, and everywhere he went, they picked up the tab and they just wanted to be around him. And at one point, he was invited to a performance by Eddie Fisher at the Waldorf Astoria's Empire Room by Elizabeth Taylor. And during the intermission, and this is fact, during the intermission, he and Elizabeth snuck upstairs to a suite, and Elizabeth's bodyguard stood guard, and they began their relationship, which lasted several months. And they were known to frequent Montgomery Clift's apartment in New York City to continue their trysts for several months, but eventually it ended. And I apologize for having to say this, but in her biography, Liz made the statement, "I know why they call him the Hammer of Thor." I had to say that. It goes with the talk.
Tim Magnuson.
One of the great ways to get a feel for Ingemar and his amazing charm with the ladies is he made an appearance on the Dinah Shore show. And you can just watch him and see him, how smooth he is and how lovable he is. And Dinah had him sing a song in Swedish. And he was really very good. He could sing. And then they sang a duet in Swedish together. And you got to get on YouTube and just look up Ingmar Johansson and Dinah Shore duet. and you pull it up and you can watch him sing his songs, and it's really, it's worth seeing because you get a good inside look at who he was. And this is right after he won the championship, so he wasn't totally corrupted at that point.
No, you don't have to fight anybody. We wanted you on the program here as a performer.
Performer?
Uh-huh.
I thought you were like Ed Sullivan.
No, not exactly.
I take a bull.
A bull?
I take a bull.
Yeah. Well, I wanted you to take a bull, you know, but I really invited you because I wanted you to sing.
But in your letter you told me that you are going to pay me.
That's right, we're going to pay you.
No. I only got paid for fighting. I sing for nothing.
Oh.
Well, I know. When I finish my singing, maybe I could punch somebody.
Oh, no, that's not absolutely necessary. You don't have to do that. We're going to pay you for singing.
You pay me for singing?
Uh-huh.
What about that?
What about that? No, we really... And we have the second. They've already put in the stools here. Come on over. There was a... Hey! There was a song I heard when I was in Sweden this summer that was perfectly beautiful called Ach Värmeland. You know that?
Oh, yes. You must mean Ach Värmland du sköna.
Ach Värmeland du sköna. That's right.
I have known that song since I was a little kid. We used to sing it in the school.
School?
No, school.
Oh, school. Oh, I see. Well, would you sing it for me?
Well, I can try.
All right.
Värmeland du sköna, du härliga land, du krona bland Svea rikes händer. Och kommer jag en mitt i det förlovade land, till Värmland jag ändå återvänder. Ja, där vill jag leva, ja, där vill jag dö. Om en gång ifrån det Värmeland jag tager mig en ömö, så vet jag att aldrig jag mig ångrar. Så vet jag att aldrig jag mig ångrar.
Como, look out! That was just beautiful. How about us doing something together? Not fighting, singing.
Good. Your singing always knocked me down.
All right, you make an American joke, I make a Swedish joke. I'm going to try singing in your language. It may never recover. Harry, play a little bit of that tune, Harry, the one we were rehearsing all day. Now, everywhere I went, they played this song. It's called Johansson. Does that mean you?
It means me, but not only me, it means all the Swedes. As Irving means every American.
Oh, well, exactly. Listen, Ingemar, there's one word in there I have to be, I've been trying to pronounce. S-K-Y-N-D-A. How do you pronounce that?
Skynda.
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 Skynda. I got it, haven't I?
Okay.
Skynda.
Yes, that's good.
All right, you start it. I'll find my place, okay?
Johansson, hör du gökarna, Johansson, häng med i krökarna, Johansson, ser du lökarna, se hur alla björkar slagit ut. Skynda dig, skogen kläder sig, alla fåglar kvittrar, alla fjädrar glittrar. Skynda dig, marken gläder sig, öppna dina sinnen, allt vad du förmår. Johansson, hör du strängarna, Johansson, var med i svängarna, Johansson. Ser du ängarna, häggen doftar redan vid på knut. skynda dig, dottern sprider sig. Alla ropar, alla flickor hoppar, skynda dig, jorden vrider sig. Lite grann korta roslagsslag. Johansson, ser du fåglarna, Johansson, gå på fåglarna, Johansson. Hör du stråkarna, korpar, våren snart är den slut. Johansson, hör du björkarna, Johansson, häng med i krökarna, Johansson. Ser du lökarna, ser du alla björkar slagit ut.
Hey!
What about that?
A lot of the women he hung around with were very famous, some starlets. He was known to have Stella Stevens, the actress and Playboy model, on his arm a lot. Gave her a lot of jewelry. Maria Benna, who was an Italian supermodel, was one of his conquests. And singer Peggy Lee was said to have been with him on numerous occasions. So he got around. He was a fast mover, a fast liver. And when his wife was asked about this stuff, she said, it's not in my nature to be jealous. So I guess she said it was okay. She just let it slide. He lived the fast life, and a lot of people have said, and I agree with this, the reason he lost the second and third Peterson fights is because he was living the high life. And he wasn't training, he wasn't working, he loved to dance, he would go out and party. Even the nights when he was training, at night you would see him up at Grossinger's or wherever he was training, you'd see him out on the dance floor. And he just didn't seem to care much more. He got beat by Peterson in the second and third fights. He went on to fight 4 more fights. He won 3 by knockout. In the 4th fight, he fought Brian London. Brian London was an excellent European fighter. He fought for the heavyweight championship several times. Didn't win it, but he was very good. Ingo beat him, but at the end of the last round, with 4 seconds to go, London flattened Johansson. He nailed him and flattened him. And he struggled to his feet. He got up, and he won the fight on points. But after that fight, he announced that he would never fight again. He said, I'm done. I have nothing to gain further from boxing. I've been the champion. I've made money. I don't have the fire anymore. I don't want to train. I'm done. And he never fought again. And he had been, the winner of that fight was supposed to take on Sonny Liston. And that would have been a heck of a fight. Because if we could have got a well-trained Ingmar Johansson in with Sonny Liston, you'd have seen some wild punching, because Ingo could punch, as could Sonny. Would have been fun to see, but it didn't happen. I don't know how much else to say. I can talk about boxing forever. I truly do love the sport, and Lars did mention that he and Peterson became friends. They did visit each other fairly often. And if you knew Floyd, Floyd was a really mild-mannered, wonderful guy. And he and Ingo spent considerable time together. And it is a shame that they both died of the same terrible disease, Alzheimer's. And it appears that most fighters, later in their lives, because of the punishment that they've taken, end up with this terrible disease. And the 2 of them, within 3 years of each other, they died. But they did become good friends. And I also thought that was kind of interesting. They're both wonderful guys. In the year 2000, Johansson was named one of the 3 greatest athletes in Sweden, behind Bjorn Borg and Ingemar Stenmark. So he was revered in his country as he was revered here in Little Sweden. And I would say that at the time Annika Sorenstam was still playing golf. She didn't retire till 2008. So I think if it were today, she would be listed among the top 4 because she obviously was a phenomenal Swedish athlete. But there have been just a ton of great Swedish athletes, and looking up a number of them, it's amazing how many great Swedish athletes are out there now in professional sports. I'm just about done here. He lived an incredible life. As I said, he died in a nursing home. He had another wife who, for the last 25 years, took care of him. And it was really sad that at the end of his life, his second wife, Bridget, and Ingo's brother got together and got him to sign a bunch of papers which moved his current wife at the time, who had taken care of him at the end, out of the picture. And they took his money, and that was the end of it. And she never saw him again. So that was a very sad ending for a wild, fast, and crazy life. But I hope you enjoyed Ingo Bingo. And thank you guys for putting this together. And he was one heck of a champion and a great Swedish role model if you want to be a playboy. Thanks.
So Russ, we just showed a film clip of the Ingmar Johansson, Floyd Patterson, June 26, 1959 fight at Yankee Stadium. Here we are at the Norden Club. And you come up and tell me what?
That I was there at the fight in 1959.
So you told me that, and then there's a backstory. How did you guys, first of all, how did it come together that a bunch of you guys went?
It was me and my brother and my father and a fellow that lived with us who was like an uncle to me and my brother, and he had gotten the tickets, and the Swedes, and he wanted to go down there, and we went down, and we left Jamestown Monday morning, drove down. The fight was supposed to be Tuesday night. It rained out because it was in Yankee Stadium. And then it rained again on Wednesday, so we stayed over again on Wednesday. And then Thursday night, we went to the fight, and we got up, and Johansson won, and we got up the next morning early and drove back to Jamestown on that fabulous old I-86, which is called Route 17, and it took us about 11, 12 hours, and I got back just in time to go to work part-time bartending at the old Starlight restaurant.
But what a story you had. My gosh. So as you're driving out there in the talk in the car, do you remember, did he talk about Johansson and kind of whether he thought he was going to be worthy?
Yeah, there was conversation that. Of course, everybody was Swedish, especially my dad and Albin, and they were just, they knew he was going to win. That was the talk all the way down. And we went by, when we went down there, we went by right where he had trained at Grossinger's. Mm-hmm. And that was a big fight training place back in those days. But we had a great time, did a lot of sightseeing because of the rain. We didn't have anything to do in the day, and we did a lot of sightseeing.
So the 26th finally arrives, the sun clear, and you go to Yankee Stadium. Do you remember, where did you sit? Was it a big crowd? What do you remember about it?
It was full. They had the ring set up, so there was seats out into the outfield and around in the infield, and that's where they had the fight all set up. And tremendous, tremendous crowd. And a tremendous amount of black people from Harlem and that down
Sure.
there, because that was their man was Floyd Patterson. And it was the funniest thing when he lost the fight and they declared Johansson the champion, it was like a mass exodus when all the people got up and walked out. It was really, I stood there and looked at that and I said, I couldn't believe what was going on with all this. But that was back in those days. That's the way it was.
There was the crowd, then there, you know, the introductions, ladies and gentlemen, from Gothenburg, Sweden, Ingmar Johansson. Was the crowd sort of split, or was it basically Peterson?
It seemed to be split. It wasn't really that split, that 50-50. It was, there was a lot of people there hollering for Johansson. Yeah.
Did you get any sense, because at that time was you know, there was a lot going on in civil rights, and this is 59, kind of that black, white, way back when Joe Louis fought the German Max Schmeling. Was there some of that? Did you get a sense of that?
Yeah, and there was a lot of things that went on outside of Yankee Stadium when it was all over. There's some pretty good fights going on. They had a lot of cops around there, and with taxi cabs, you know, getting people into taxi cabs and getting them away from there. But there was a number of fights that they were breaking up out there between people.
The fight itself, I think 3 rounds. I mean, I don't think it lasted very long. And all the knockdowns occurred in the 3rd round. As Peterson goes down for the first time, what was your reaction? Like, oh my God, maybe.
Well, when I saw the hit he took, and when he went down, I think he was out that whole time until he got knocked down the 2nd time there. He was knocked down 3 times, but the 3rd time was the one that really put him away. But when he got hit with that right hand, the thunder in the right, lightning in the left, yeah, that's what they were saying. But there was a lot of happy people, but a lot of sad people that he had won.
So what did you do? Did you give your dad a hug? I don't know if they're high-fiving then, but how was your reaction?
Well, we had a great time. We went out down there and went and got something to eat after the fight and that. And then, like I say, we slept quick and got up early to get back to Jamestown.
So you get back to Jamestown, you're bartending at the Starlight, and no doubt you're saying, guess where I was last night?
Well, I couldn't say much because I couldn't talk. I had been yelling so much that I didn't have any voice left. And probably a lot of people like that, that I wasn't talking. But it was a great experience.
Yeah, I was just going to say, tonight, did it bring back some memories?
Oh, yeah, it did. It was a fun time. A lot of hype was going on. And it was a good fight, but it was a fast fight. Mm-hmm. And when Johansson hit him in the jaw, after that before the 2nd knockdown, he was out of it. I mean, you could see that he was about done with the whole thing. It was a highlight for me back then to see it, and being a family from Swedes, it was a real big thing for us. We really enjoyed it very much.
Russ, what was the reaction of citizens of Jamestown, which was, you know, a large Swedish population in 1959? What was the reaction around town?
Well, there was a tremendous, great reaction from the Swedish people, and that the Swede was now the champion of the world, and a lot of people were a little angry about that because nobody expected him to win.
This is great. Thank you. Any more questions, Randy? All right, put in for mileage.
Thanks a lot.